Well, welcome to tonight's webinar. I am delighted that you have joined me. As mentioned, if at any point you have a question or a concern, feel free to use that chat box at the bottom right. It's there for you. I want to make sure that we address any concerns you have. If we don't have time for all of the questions that are raised, know that I'm happy to follow up by email post-webinar. So it's very important to me that you leave feeling as though you've been heard as well. Tonight we will be discussing volunteer recruitment and also I would name retention for stewardship. There's going to be some data provided in terms of the landscape. There's going to be some information about helpful tools and strategies. And I hope that we come away with a collective understanding of what are some successful ideas around making sure that volunteer ministry in your parish is indeed a ministry. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to note is that I am a program director at the Episcopal Church Foundation. The Episcopal Church Foundation is a nonprofit organization with a mission that seeks to strengthen the leadership and financial capabilities of Episcopal congregations, dioceses, and communities of faith to pursue their mission and ministry. We're a separate organization from the Episcopal Church Center or the National Church or DFMS, and we are completely lay-led, and we seek to provide as many resources in leadership and financial resources to empower you to live into your ministry, what God is calling you to do. Tonight, we'll go over a quick theology of volunteerism because everything that we do in the Episcopal Church Foundation is rooted in spirituality. Create a landscape of nonprofit volunteering across all nonprofits. Talk about the role of impact, how to effectively plan for those volunteers once you recruit them. And then what is the impact of thank you? And what are some thank you practices that can be helpful to you? So first, at the Episcopal Church Foundation, we have what we almost would call a textbook for capital campaigns or annual giving. It's called The Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. It encompasses writings from many of his books that focus on community and fundraising, and most importantly, transformation. This, if you have not used it for a Bible study or for any type of adult education, this is a great formational piece for any fundraising initiative. It sets the stage for fundraising not being a means to an end, or what I like to say, for fundraising not being that thing that you have to do in order to ensure ministry takes place at your parish, but rather that fundraising is ministry itself, and that all along the way, if fundraising is ministry, then there's opportunities for connection and transformation. And so in speaking of connection, I love this quote where it talks about people have such a need for friendship and for community building, and that friendship is a way in which both the person inviting another person to make a gift and the person being asked have an opportunity for connection and transformation. It offers us a new way of belonging to a community, a deeper engagement. So when we think about a theology of volunteerism, then, we can apply this great quote from Frederick Buechner. He talks about that vocation or calling is that place where the world's greatest need and your deep hunger meet. It just so happens that the most effective plan to recruiting an A stewardship team is also good theology. And we're going to show you how to do just that by calling forth your parishioners' talents, their skills, and their passions. So get ready. Here's my next. What does Justin Timberlake have to do with volunteering? Now, I can't see all of you, and so some of you might be shaking your heads saying, who is Justin Timberlake? And some of you might be saying, I have no idea. But he has a song that says, it's like you're my mirror staring back at me. Couldn't get any bigger with anyone else beside me. So as of September 2014 is at a 10-year low. What does that mean? It means that over the course of 10 years, volunteering has declined by specific percentage points, down from 25.4% in 2012 to 22.4% in 2014. Now, what does this have to do with Justin Timberlake? Some will be fast, and admittedly I was actually one of those. They'd be quick to say, well, it's the economy's fault. And they wouldn't necessarily be wrong. But what we have to realize is that economy is a reflection of our nonprofits or our churches. If the economy is down, fundraising and volunteering will be likely down. Now that's counterintuitive, because oftentimes what we think of is, well, man, if the economy is down and jobs are less, then won't people have more time? Won't people have more opportunity? And what we've come to find out, this statistic is coming from the Labor of Bureau Statistics and Volunteering, is that actually just the opposite is true. What we find is that places where unemployment is at its highest shows the lowest level of volunteering. So states like Mississippi, which is currently where the highest unemployment is, actually has the lowest level of volunteering in the United States. You can see when I talked about that 10-year dip, you can see this reflected in this chart right here from 2002 to 2014. And we continue to make a modest decline. So what does this mean? Well, what this means is that the truth is that the largest majority of volunteers tend to be well-educated and employed, and they tend to be, these statistics are showing, parents in their mid-30s and early 40s. So you are more likely to volunteer if you are employed than if you aren't. So despite the evidence, there seems to be a wishful narrative that volunteering might somehow be the silver lining of a bad economy. And so tonight, I'm here to set us free from that obligation. The most important thing separating volunteers from non-volunteers is not free time or opportunity. So what is it? What is that thing that makes people give up something that is very special to them, their resources and their time and their gifts? Well, let's talk about the role of meaning-making and impact. A 2011 report, which was commissioned by the Career Advisory Board. There are a lot of different boards out there, but I like to look at the Career Advisory Board for showing me trends across different demographics because they're funded by the Harris Interactive. And they show that the number one factor that young adults between ages 21 and 31 named as wanting in a successful career was a sense of meaning. Though managers, according to that Generation X or millennials might be motivated by money, what most folks are saying in these particular demographics is that they're motivated because they want meaningful work. They want to know that what they do makes a difference. So there was a New York Times article that came out November 30th, 2013, which states that when individuals adopt what we call a meaning mindset, meaning they seek connection, similar to that theology that we were just talking about, then clear benefits can result, including improved psychological well-being, more creativity, and enhanced work performance. Workers who find their jobs meaningful are more engaged and less likely to leave their current positions. So this has some serious implications for our volunteer efforts in the Episcopal Church. So on the first follow-up then from that is, before you do anything, articulate why what you do is important. Why is it important for you to have volunteers in the stewardship committee or your annual giving? Now, let me note very clearly right here, the answer to that question is not, we need volunteers or we won't raise money. If we don't raise money, then we will not make our budget. This is not the impact that I'm trying to describe. Rather, instead, the impact that I'm seeking to find out is, why is your ministry important? A life with meaning. Whose lives will be touched by this work? Is there potential for transformation in the process of volunteering? Is there potential for transformation in the ministries that will be impacted by your work? This is the true impact that people want to feel a connection to. So, first, however, you need to have a plan. Now, there are lots of really good stewardship plans out there. And my job tonight is not to prioritize one over the other. And I won't go around tonight actually outlining different plans. But I wanted to describe what a typical plan might have, so that you could see that there are different opportunities for different types of leaders and engagement. So here's just a regular plan for New Consecration Sunday, which is one of many really quality stewardship options. For more stewardship options, I'd like to put in a plug for Stewardship in the Next Millennium. That's a webinar. There's some really good pieces of information there. But moving us back, so have a plan. Here we have outlined, before we move forward, different items. We have a team leader. We have a celebration lunch coordinator. So this may be not someone who would go around making an invitation. This is your party planner. This is a person who knows how to cook. This is a person who knows how to get people excited about getting together. A leadership dinner coordinator. Then you might have folks who are your announcers, or they're the sharers, a treasurer or financial secretary involved, pastor, although I like to name that it doesn't have to be your clergy person. It could very much be a lay person who is taking on a role of perhaps of a spiritual emphasis chair, person committed to creating a theology around this fundraising effort, or a guest leader. Now, when you outline what roles you're going to need, what you'll need to know as well is, connected to each role, what are the different skills and passions that will really make your plan sing? So it's not just, okay, I need someone to plan a party, but instead it's, what are the skills that are necessary to make sure that that party is fun, that people are engaged? Now, obviously it might be good food, but maybe it's, we need someone who knows how to bring around some entertainment, or a charismatic leader. So where do you go to find them? Well, there are a lot of different ways. The first one is a time and talent based on passion and skills rather than committees. Wouldn't that be revolutionary if in your parish hall you had a fair where you talked about how people could implement their particular gifts and skills? So there was a 2014 survey done of all millennials. And did you know that 98% of millennials in the workforce said that they were willing to volunteer, but that of that, 82% wanted to use their specific skills in volunteering, meaning that they didn't just want to sign up for any job, but that they wanted to know that they were giving up their best for the role and the job. So, in addition to that, you have the power of observation. So what does this mean? Who's the first in or last out of the kitchen? Who takes all the kids home for play dates after church? Who always knows the latest gossip? Who's that opinion maker? Now don't laugh, that's your best communications committee member right there. Ask them hey, we're building a team and we need people who could host or write or design an e-news. Do any of these activities appeal to you? Rather than filling a role, look for ways in which people can utilize their best self. Now, oftentimes when managing a campaign, people will always say, well, I'll do anything except ask for money. You might hear that a bit. And so you can build an awesome stewardship team this way, because the truth about stewardship is that it's much more about hospitality, about stories and invitation, than simply about asking for money. Although, when done well, it can be a really exciting ministry. So here is an example of what could be used for inventory of a person's passions and interests. And I've seen this utilized in parishes to pair up with a ministry fair. These are different items where people can sign up and talk about what are the things that they love to do, something that they're willing to be mentored in, and things that they are willing to do if needed but would really prefer someone else do them. This is a great way to get to know your parish. It's a great way to also pair perhaps folks that have skills and gifts with perhaps people who maybe don't have those skills and gifts but have the passion, and to be able to create a workforce. Now, I'm going to stop here real quick. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to use this chat bar right at the bottom. Leslie will draw my attention. Now, let's move on. The importance of recruitment preparation. So wait, don't rush out to recruit just yet. Some of the most important work of building a great team happens before you even pick up that phone. It's important to make sure that jobs are ready and well prepared for your volunteers, because I can't tell you the number of times I've heard a volunteer say, well, it just was so frustrating. I didn't know what I was doing or what I was supposed to be doing or how it made it any difference. This is why it's important to have job descriptions. What are the responsibilities and tasks listed for each of the jobs listed on your stewardship team? Where can they go for guidance and support? So not just what is the expectation of what they will do, but where can they go to get the resources that they need in order to be successful? This is a great question. If there is anything that you can leave tonight's webinar with, it's this question. What can I do for you in order for you to be successful? This implies that not only are you ready and available for the person, but that you want to provide them with resources. So what tools might they need? Well, there are ECF webinars. Many package stewardship programs do have explanations. They might need a list of deadlines, or maybe they're going to need a list of contacts, people in the parish that they need to get to know. They might need resources by way of invitations, a budget. The best resource as well you can provide is perhaps a folder of what's been done in previous years. Gather these tools beforehand, or at least make a list and commit to helping your volunteers gather them as a first step. So you'll see right here, this is an overview of a job description, and you'll see that it looks like a regular job description. Now, because it's so tiny, I took the most important part and I made it larger for you all. This job description comes from actually my own parish, St. John the Evangelist. And they wanted to make sure that expectations were clearly articulated, but that in addition to having expectations clearly articulated, they wanted to ensure that their theology was also interwoven into the job description. So you'll see here, they've got all the different items that they expect. You'll see that it also talks about where they can go and what they can do in order to ensure other volunteers. Now, this is how you inspire participation. While you ensure that expectations are clearly laid out and people have a sense of comfort in knowing that they're stepping into a job that is well outlined and with resources available, this is where you inspire people to give of themselves. Nothing builds commitment and loyalty like someone saying, I want you. Not just any warm body, but you, because of your specific passion and skills that you have already shown us. Once you've chosen your person, go see them. Don't email or call on the phone. Why is that important? So consider these statistics. When a person is asked to give to a particular cause in person by someone they know, giving increases to 20 to 40%. That's how big a difference the personal visit makes. So if you want to ensure that your volunteer base is motivated, make an appointment to meet them in person. Once there, list their skills, not what you need, and see what they can bring into the equation. Then say, you know, you really could help us make a difference here. I'd like you to lead this part of the project. Now, one of the most common things that I hear when I do workshops is people say, well, I feel like I push and people just don't respond. You're working hard to support a meaningful and rewarding cause. Now, you feel good about the work you're doing and you want to share the joy of giving back with others. Absolutely. But remember that this is an invitation. This isn't just an invitation to fulfill a job that you really have to get done. You're inviting them to participate in a ministry with you, a ministry that could potentially be transformational in their life. So it's important that you see this as not just an obligation or a requirement, it's an invitation, and it's about teamwork. So share your feelings with them about how they could be of specific value to your ministry and ask them to join you. Now, you'll have more success this way recruiting volunteers by inviting rather than pushing. And the ones that you are able to recruit will likely share your passions for the cause. Now, I'd like to go back real quick. When we were talking about asking specifically, you could really help us make a difference, I'd like you to lead this part of the project. There is a culture shift at foot that's taken place since the 1970s, where in the past we used to have committee structures where people would delegate tasks. What we're finding is that volunteers are more likely to remain loyal and to be retained, not to be lost through attrition, if they feel as though they are in charge of an entirety of a program, or say an initiative rather than simply a task. Give people responsibility. Allow people to brainstorm. Maybe they'll have different ideas as to how to implement projects and what you have. And that's great. Make it so that they're able to put their own stamp, their own remarkable stamp on their work. So what do we do? When you sit down with that potential person in person, walk through this step by step first. Is there a need? Is there a solution? What are your fears of participating? What are the benefits? One way to cover all of this is to imagine, hey, you're directing a motion picture. Your goal here is to get the prospective volunteer to view the movie in their head, seeing the problem you're trying to solve. This way it becomes their own. They can visualize themselves as the hero or the heroine in the effort. they can see themselves as players instead of on the sidelines, trying to see how they can best be utilized. So earlier I described that millennials and Generation Xers do want to be involved. So what are some great ways to ensure that takes place? Because they do want. So, I'm making sure that slide pulls up, and it didn't. Okay, then I'll walk it through. So how to engage millennials and Generation Xers? First of all, one of the first and foremost things is that millennials know deep within their identity that volunteering is good for them. So Pew out of Washington, D.C. has published many different reports about millennials over the years. And what we're finding out is that millennials are showing giving characteristics that are similar to the greatest generation. And one of the reasons for that is that in many school situations, public and private, they're required to give time. And many of them have been formed to be volunteers both in social and private settings. So millennials know that volunteering is good for them. So one of the ways in which you can ensure that they remain focused on your initiative is to ask a millennial for advice. Help them create structure for your proposed campaign. Let them lead. Provide them with opportunities for growth. Pair them with a mentor that can affirm their decisions along the way and provide real-time feedback for what they are doing. Because not only is providing them feedback something that across the board we know that millennials are looking for, but that also allows us to begin to create a collaborative environment for our volunteers so that it's not just us and them, but it's us working together as a team. Now, we talked about each volunteer having specific skills. So Gumby is flexible. What I'm going to ask of you to do is to listen to your volunteers' passions and to adapt. There's a great story about a woman named Suzanne who was asked to join a development committee for an overseas mission. A church had partnered with another church down in Mexico, and Suzanne was asked to lead the development effort. Suzanne did not want to lead the development effort. What she really wanted to do was to be a trip coordinator. She felt like this was her calling. And so she and her daughter made a number of different trips down to visit their partnering parish. Well, what happened was that she became, through the process, a wonderful partner in engaging not just new volunteers, but the new givers. As she brought new people on board, she became a charismatic leader that people wanted to listen to in the parish. Not just that, but she developed relationships both at her home parish and at her partnering parish, and was able to strategically align different missional components together. So in a way, she was able to raise way more money in the long run than what she would have had she have been just the chair of the development committee. By listening to her strengths and gifts, they were able to utilize her to her best extent. So what do we do? You've had that conversation. That person has agreed because you've been flexible. Now what do you do? Well, first, you follow up with an introduction to the group. You've brought on your different volunteers. Now this group needs to get to know one another. Now, what do you do? I did see that question. What do you do if there are no volunteers? What happens if you're the only one there? So if there are no volunteers, what you do is you first start with your job descriptions. What is it that you're going to need by way of not just fulfilling a role, but of skills and passions. Then you start communicating at your parish, or more broadly, what the proposed impact of this will be. How will people's lives be transformed by volunteering for this? Not just how will people allow you to help make money for your budget. How will people seek greater connection with one another? How will their lives be formed spiritually through this opportunity? As you begin to communicate more broadly, you look for different recommendations. We talked about that person who might be the greatest gossip or the greatest communicator. You start asking people in the parish, hey, who has gifts and abilities in X, Y, and Z? Now, it's not just who has gifts and abilities in inviting people to make an ask, but maybe it's, hey, who do we know that would be willing to write a beautiful annual campaign prayer for me? Who do we know that really seems committed to throwing a good party? Who do we know that would be willing to talk about their faith journey on a Sunday morning? Who do we know that would be willing to maybe make an email once a week that outlines and how it connects annual giving effort? Who do we know who writes really great thank you cards and would be willing to give up of their time writing thank you cards? Who do we know that has a powerful message of transformation that would be willing to share online with us? Then you start to create your list of potential people where you can meet one-on-one. So you've met one-on-one, you've made your group of folks. Now you make connections. Send an email with everyone's contact. Make sure all your new recruits know how to reach one another. What I like to suggest is even perhaps throwing a dinner or a party on the front end, inviting people over, talking about what the impact will be of what they're about to do, and thank them for being willing to even consider participating in their ministry. Next, empower your volunteers. We talked about ensuring that people have job descriptions. We talked about ensuring that people know where to get resources if they need them. Go over that job description with them. Go over the skills list for the rest of the committee. Ask that committee if there are additional people in the community who could bring strengths to this group. You want volunteers who will bring their friends on board. Maybe someone from the church has a friend outside of the church who has a particular gift or ability that they would be willing to volunteer in a short-term way to your parish. This is a great way to engage new people. I knew someone who had a friend who was a great graphics designer and wanted some basic graphic designer work done for their campaign. And so they brought this person online and had them get involved and volunteered their time. That person was so inspired that they decided to show up on a Sunday morning and see what it was all about. This is a great opportunity to get the word out by looking to see who are the people you know. Now, we get to the heart of what I think of in terms of stewardship education. Oftentimes, when people think about stewardship, they think only about the fall annual or the annual appeal, and they don't think about what happens the rest of the 9 months. And that's where I think stewardship takes place just as much. Stewardship is the way in which we utilize resources and say thank you for the gifts that God has given us. So your role in giving thanks for your volunteers is paramount in that you are going to communicate your own theology of giving through your thanks. So to undergird this point a bit, quick poll. How much do you think a volunteer's time is worth? So there's actually a group out there that determines this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics utilizes various points of data to create an hourly rate for volunteers. So how much do you think it is? Is it $6? $10? $18? As of March 2015, the national average is $23 an hour. $23 an hour for a volunteer hour. What I like to tell parishes to do as an exercise is to spend time thinking, how many hours does it take for a typical Sunday worship service to take place? Calculate, how many hours did that take on Sunday morning? People are amazed. Now, I'm not just talking your typical rules, although those are important. But so I know that in some churches there are people that volunteer to drive elderly people to church on Sunday. Calculate that total in. Calculate your altar guild. Calculate your Christian formation volunteers. People are amazed when that hours begin to total 50, 100. One parish I worked with, 200 volunteer hours every Sunday. Then you multiply that by $23, and you begin to see that your volunteer's time is precious. And it truly is a gift from God that we're provided. By the way, that exercise of calculating hours, this can be a powerful opportunity to communicate this to your parish. So oftentimes I recommend when you do come up with those totals, if you decide to total them and then multiply it by the 23, make sure you publish that in a number of different ways so that people can see and honor that which has been given. We give thanks for the offering every Sunday. Perhaps there's a way in which you can sacramentalize this time as well. So going back to Henry Nouwen, when fundraising is done right, the person asking and the person giving come together to participate in a new thing that God is doing. People's time is very valuable, but I can think of nothing greater than being engaged in ministry, in the work of transformation. And fundraising is an opportunity in which we can invite people along this journey through their volunteer work. Now, I've provided a quick overview of different ways in which you can be effective in recruitment. We also have some upcoming webinars. Here is a webinar coming up on May 19th. Lessons for all churches from church planting. If you're interested, feel free to participate in that webinar. But I also wanted to say that if after this webinar you have specific questions to your context, feel free to either make sure that you put your question in the chat, or you can always follow up with me. My email is right there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So we have a little bit of time here. Are there any questions that you'd like specific to your context? So the slides were sent out by email today. There was a link that was sent out. However, if you did not receive the slides, feel free to contact me and I can make sure that I send a PDF your way. We want to make sure that you have all the information that you need. In addition, a recording of this webinar will be available. Typically, the time is about 48 hours after completion of a webinar. You'll find that link up on our website. Now, I see some great chat coming up. Excellent. I'm always happy to follow up. Thank you for providing your email. I would be delighted. So when the recording is available, you'll receive an email with a link. And so if you've registered utilizing your email, that should be sent directly to you. In addition, on the website, we have a column marked webinars. Feel free to click on there, and there's a section where it shows where you can click on those recordings. So I mentioned that Stewardship in the Next Millennium, that's a great one to use. We have a couple years worth of those. Now, Leslie pointed out ECFVP also has a list of all webinars upcoming. Now, Henry Nouwen's book, that's a great question, Charles. Did you know that this book is less than $5? I think I picked mine up for like $1.99. It's available on Amazon. It's located very widely. It's a great resource for your parish, very affordable, and it's very thin with accessible language for all. Okay. I have a great question coming in. Anything you don't want to do for annual stewardship? Yes, I got some great stories of things you don't want to do when doing annual stewardship recruitment. One, you do not want to use obligation or shame as a means of recruitment. Do not shame people into volunteering. You may get the job done in the short term, but in the long term, the damage done is going to be just, in the long term, it'll create a lot of problems. So what does obligation and shame mean? Obligation and shame means if you don't do this, our parish will suffer. Or obligation and shame is if we would all just do our part, then we would have enough volunteers. Obligation and shame might be an example of saying, well, you know, if only such and such, you know, would step up to the plate, but it seems like they have other priorities. Things like that. These are great examples of ways in which people have been hurt in the past. And we want to remember that this is a ministry where people are being asked, what is God calling them to do? And so God does not participate in shaming. Nick Mason says, I'm hearing you advocate that stewardship is year-round. Is there a guide or a template for that? I would... Okay, you are going to think that I'm just really redundant. But I'm going to say, if you haven't checked out the Stewardship in the Next Millennium webinar, this is for you. What I make a case for is that stewardship is absolutely a year-round exercise, but it's not year-round asking for money. Rather, it's still a giving opportunity in the fall. But it's 9 months worth of thanking people and using that thanking as an opportunity for formation. So essentially, what would it look like in February or March if, say, your rector or choir director, after a particularly beautiful choir anthem came out and says, thank you, because of your gifts that we're able to have beautiful ministry. And because of your gifts, 22% of every dollar goes to this important ministry. Without an ask, but rather just pointing people to how their gift is utilized and in a transparent way showing your missional priorities. Is there any data on comfortable involvement of look at that. Involvement of males and females, like are both genders seemingly equally comfortable in this arena? Well, I'm not sure. I might need a greater clarification of what you want, and that's definitely something we can talk about online. I can tell you that across the board, women tend to be making up the largest number of volunteers on all the different polls in nonprofits. It would seem that, especially in churches, women tend to make up the greatest number of the volunteer base. In terms of gifts and skills, I'm not sure that there is any data that would connect to fundraising in this particular arena. Now, Vicki, could you help me? I see on the position description for St. John's the 6 qualities. Any others? Do you mean any other examples or any other qualities? I'm not sure what you're asking. Any other qualities? So I pulled out specifically the chair. However, each of their job descriptions had different qualities connected. So, for example, they had, for their events area, they had like party planning and coordination, a desire to connect people to the life and mission of St. John's through food and so there's a way in which you can tailor the job description with different qualities. Okay, if I have a conversation with a millennial, what kind of questions might I ask to reveal their gifts? Well, so instead of asking a skills-based question, what you might begin with is, what are they passionate about? What excites them? When they think about the church, why are they there? And who would they like to become? How can you best support them in their life and mission at your parish? Besides the NCS fundraising program, what other FR methods have been effective? I don't know what FR is. Oh, fundraising methods? I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand the question, but I do want to answer it. Besides the NCS. Oh, is Consecration Sunday? Haha. Yes, okay, sorry. It took me a minute, I got to it. Okay, lots of fundraising methods have been effective. I would highly suggest looking at what I would highly suggest is looking at breaking down who is in your parish, what are the demographics, and then looking to see what are the different communication needs that they have in order to be reached. So that is all covered in the Stewardship for the Next Millennium webinar, but talking about where is your movable middle, where is your greatest opportunity for increase in giving, where is your greatest opportunity for greater engagement, and ensuring that you are investing your resources strategically toward that group of people and making sure that you have the right volunteers for that strategy. That seems to be where we're seeing the greatest amount of growth. All right, are there any other questions? How do we move past the typical 20% of membership does 80% of the labor for just about anything that goes on in a church? Preach it, right? Okay. That is a great one. So, you know, it's easy for this to happen, and it is typical that 20% of the membership is doing the majority of the labor, and it would seem like it's a particular generation quite often that's doing it. So it requires a commitment. It requires a commitment from the folks that are doing it, that when new volunteers show up, that they're willing for things to change, one. So it requires a commitment to change. Two, it requires a commitment for us to move away from simply delegating tasks to delegating entire responsibilities and initiatives. So that way we're providing people with leadership, not just job fulfilling. People find more meaning when they feel like they have control of an outcome than if they're simply completing a task. And they're going to have a greater sense of autonomy for asking for help and support if they feel as though they have an ownership involved. So that's number 2. 3, passion and skills. I know that I've talked about this earlier, but doing an inventory of your church of where their passion and skills are a great way to find out what people in your parish might have unexpected opportunities for engagement that have not been explored. For example, at a parish that I belonged to about 12 years ago, the first parish I belonged to, the Episcopal Church women had slowly died out, frankly. There was just not any women left. And it was a parish that had been growing in numbers of particularly gay men who were interested in hospitality. And what the vestry decided to do was to retire the idea that it was only the Episcopal Church women who were in charge of hospitality or different types of events, but rather it opened it up and said, anybody that's interested in this type of ministry, let us know. And there was an overwhelming flood of people that wanted to be involved but had never felt as though they had space to do it. So this is a great example. So I was asked, how do you gently retire the old 20%? In this situation, they were retired by natural causes, but in a situation where that's not available to you, what this means is that there needs to be a utilization of a nonprofit best practice, which is how many times do you thank your volunteers? You thank them 7 different times. 7 different times, 7 different ways throughout the year. People are willing to step down if they know that they've had an impact and if they know that what they've done is acknowledged and that they will continue to be cared about even after they are no longer fulfilling that job. Oftentimes, people's identities are wrapped up in what they do. And so to the degree with which you can acknowledge what they've done, celebrate it, and ensure that that relationship and connection will live on well after they've moved on to a different position, that is a way in which you can empower people to step aside. All right, we have time for one more question. Are there any other questions? Okay. If a question occurs to you, and I've already hung up, feel free once again to use this email located right here or give me a call. It's my personal cell phone. I'm happy to be of service to you in the weeks ahead. But in the meantime, I'm just very thankful to you all for being engaged and for participating and volunteering your time to meet with me this evening. So thank you all very much. And I look forward to seeing you on future webinars.